In this video, we're talking about the Sony A7 IV and specifically which memory card is going to be best for you based on your needs. You probably know that it does utilize two UHS-2 card slots, and one of those slots is CF Express Type A compatible. If you're not familiar with CF Express Type A, they are very fast and very good cards, but unfortunately they're very expensive, they're limited in capacity, and at this point they're kind of hard to get. So there are other options, and the good news is that there's actually no setting on the Sony A7 IV that requires you to use this card. Now you can absolutely get away with a UHS-1 V30 card for shooting up to 4K 60 and still be able to get away with it. There are better and faster cards, and depending on photography and video, they're going to respond a bit differently. So we're going to break them down for you, starting with the video and then get into photography later to show you the differences. So typically in video, you're going to want a big and fast card for shooting video. Now I shy away from the CF Express because it is limited at 160 gigabytes, and for video shooters, you know that's really not a heck of a lot, especially when you're shooting with something like 4K 60 in 10-bit. That goes real quick. Now that's a downside, but a positive of the CF Express Type A is of course the read and write and transfer speeds, which are very quick, and there's basically no buffer. If you're shooting photography, you can shoot for hundreds of photos and never have to miss a beat. With the other cards, you definitely are limited, but the speed of the cards is going to determine by how much. Let's talk about my go-to in this instance. I just can't justify going over to that CF Express Type A, at least yet, just because of the price and limited capacity. I went for a V90 UHS-2, and it is more than capable for this camera setup. Both for video and photography, it's definitely more than my needs. It's also worth noting that you can definitely get away with a slower V60 card and even a V30 and still shoot 4K 60. So don't worry, you can still bring along your old memory cards and have a use for them. Now in terms of capacity, when you're shooting video, you're going to want as big of a card as possible. I went with the Pro Grade 256 gigabytes because I really hate running out of room or getting cut short right in the middle of a clip or photos. I can't stand it. So I went that route with a 256 and definitely haven't looked back. There are smaller cards like a 128 which are going to serve a lot of people just fine, but it really depends on your specific needs. Now in terms of video, the settings you use are going to drastically determine how much record time you're going to be able to use on your card. Here's a list for you that I did showing you some examples of what you can expect to get out of some of these cards based off of some of the settings in the A7 IV. As you can see, depending on the settings that you use, there is a massive difference. One great and very capable aspect of this camera now is its ability to shoot in 10-bit, which is incredibly more useful when editing in post. You're gonna be able to pull a lot more information out of your clips and a lot more flexibility when it comes to editing in general. So naturally, when you're going from 8 to 10-bit, there's a lot more information, and this is gonna use a lot more of that card faster. Now in terms of photography, of course, it all depends on your needs. This camera is capped at 10 frames per second, which is ample for most, and having said that, the buffer is going to be a big factor depending on what you're shooting. If you do shoot a lot of sports or birds, you're going to want a relatively big buffer so that you're not stopped right when the action happens. Now using that CF Express Type A, you can pretty much have an unlimited buffer, hundreds of photos before needing to stop and regroup if ever. The Pro Grade UHS-2 that I use gets around 60 to 70 shots, which is more than ample for my needs. Keep in mind, as you go down to a V60, you're going to get less, and it's going to be slower to clear that buffer before you can shoot again. And for the slowest V30 cards, it's going to be even slower to clear with a smaller buffer as well. Also consider upgrading or kind of growing into the card as you go on to bigger and better things, or potentially the next camera. So let's recap. If you're a photographer, do you need an unlimited buffer? If you do, well, consider that CF Express Type A, but remember it's only 160 gigabytes or so at this point. If you don't need an unlimited buffer, but you want a decent buffer like me with lots of storage, consider that UHS-2. And if you're just gonna be filming or taking the odd shot here, but nothing super intensive, you know what? You can get away with a V60 or even a V30. Now, in terms of memory card brands, there's lots of opinions out there, but they're really all the same stuff for the most part. They're all gonna fail eventually, except for maybe the Sony Tough cards, which are literally tough and branded that way for a reason. They're very, very durable. There's also the SanDisk Extreme, which I've had great use of and not a ton of problems over the years and years of shooting. Now, in terms of Lexar, they've been great for me, but there have been reports of them failing for some people. I've actually had more SanDisk fail than Lexar personally, but don't rule out ProGrade either, which is a great option and usually comes at a bit of a discount. Either way, if there are two cards that you're considering and one is not really much more, it might be worth just biting the bullet and buying that card. They do often go on sale and sometimes quite significantly, so make sure you keep an eye out for those sales. At the end of the day, it's going to be personal preference in brands, and of course your shooting needs is going to determine which card is going to be best for you. For me, at this point, it's the UHS-2. I hope that the CF Express Type A does get adopted and becomes more readily available and bigger in capacity, so I can invest in that in the future and potentially move that to the next camera that I buy. But for now, personally, the best isn't actually the best for me, and you might want to think about that for yourself as well. Well, let's leave it at that, guys. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it and you found it helpful, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Join the community. If you want to buy any of these memory cards, I will drop affiliate links down in the description for you. And like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.